Well, Dave, welcome, and thanks for talking to us today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So tell me, you've got a new book coming out later this month, so sort of walk us through what that's like and tell us a little bit about it.
The new book is called Since She Went Away, and it tells the story of a single mom named Jenna Barton, and Jenna's best friend has disappeared several months before the book opens. So, and on the night that Jenna's friend disappeared, Jenna was supposed to meet her, and Jenna showed up late, and when she got there, her friend was gone. And so the whole community is upside down trying to find out what happened to this woman. Jenna feels a tremendous amount of guilt because she thinks, if I was there that night, maybe something would have been different. And then the story is also told from the point of view of Jenna's son, who's 15 years old and a high school student, and he kind of bears some responsibility for his mother being late that night. And then he has also met a girl who has just moved to town, and this girl does not seem to have a past. And so the big question in the book is there a connection between this new girl in town who has some weird stuff going on in her life and Jenna's friend who disappeared a few months earlier? So it's really these two people in the same family trying to put together what's going on in this town.
Yeah. It's really interesting. One of the things that I think is neat about your work is that you're definitely interested in disappearances, unexplained, people falling off the face of the map, that sort of stuff. What do you think it is about that, particularly that sort of subject, that keeps drawing you back to it?
I think it's just so weird. I just think it's so weird that adults can disappear. It's understandable to some extent when a kid disappears because kids are vulnerable and we think of people preying on kids and stuff like that. But when you get to be an adult, you feel kind of secure in the world,
Yeah.
Like when I remember being a kid and I'd see some, weird public service announcement about kids disappearing, and then I'd walk down the street and I'd be like, oh my gosh, the white van's gonna pull up and somebody's gonna take me away, But as adults, I think we think, well, we're relatively secure, we're relatively able to take care of ourselves, but people disappear. Awful things happen to people, or maybe people disappear because they want to disappear.
Yeah.
So I think it's the fact that when someone disappears and we don't know what happened to them, you can project all this stuff onto them. Was it a crime? Did they run away? Are they alive? Are they dead? Did they have a good reason for going away? Did they have a problem that they're running away from? And it's just all this uncertainty. And as a fiction writer, you can just fill that uncertainty up with all sorts of weird, crazy stuff and see what happens.
Yeah. Of course, I guess you were growing up in the late 70s, 80s, the kid around that era. That was like the very beginning of that stranger danger sort of teaching, it's like be careful of the men in vans type.
Yeah, I was a kid when they started putting faces on milk cartons, and when they first probably started passing legislation like the Eton Patz case in New York City was like the big one, and then like John Walsh and Adam Walsh, like that became a big thing. I guess I was maybe about 12 when that happened, and I think Adam Walsh was like 6. So definitely that was in the air. It was probably when we first started passing legislation and like paying attention to missing children and missing people as a problem, instead of just like before that it would probably be like someone disappears, we'll do a little something about it, but there wasn't really a means, I guess, to get information out to a lot of people. Like, now you had television, you were starting to have computers, you could get information out to a lot of people at one time. And so in the past, I guess missing persons cases were always just little local things, and if you weren't in that area, you had no idea that this person was missing.
Yeah. So you grew up in Ohio, didn't you?
I did. Cincinnati. Cursed with being a a Bengals fan and a Reds fan. Now the Reds.
We all bear our burdens.
We all bear our burdens. The Reds now, and actually now I'm rooting for the Reds to be the worst team in baseball because they'll get a high draft pick next year.
Ah.
But it's sad to suffer through.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you lived in Bowling Green for?
I moved to Bowling Green in 2008, so I'm trying to do the math on that. That's 8 years this summer since I've moved to Bowling Green. Yeah.
And that was for, you got a job teaching at Western, didn't you?
That was because I got a job at WKU. I had never been to, even though I only grew up about 3.5 hours from here, I had never been to Bowling Green before I came for my job interview. I'd driven past on I-65, but I don't think I'd ever set foot in Bowling Green. And all I really knew about Bowling Green was WKU had a good basketball team that occasionally would be in the tournament, and I knew that Corvettes were made here. But other than that, I really did not know much about Bowling Green when I moved here.
Yeah. It seems like you've really settled in, though, as far as you're sort of, a lot of professors, you know, they sort of come in for a little while and then sort of bounce in a couple of years.
Yeah. This is a nice place to live. It really is a nice place to live. And I had, you know, part of it is just like, I had moved around a lot in my 20s, and then like, I got my master's degree one place, got my PhD another place. I got my first teaching job was in North Carolina. So it was like there had been all this moving around and everything. And you know, at some point, like I remember when I was like 24 or whatever, and if I had to move somewhere, it was just like, oh, I've got these 3 boxes and you know, and maybe a mattress, and that's it. When you get to a certain age, you got all this, and moving is just like a much bigger hassle at some point. So it's just like, that makes it sound like I'm not moving because I'm lazy, and that is part of it, is that I'm lazy. But I do like living in Bowling Green too. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, you were already writing a long time before that, though, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I started writing seriously in my late 20s. You know, when I went back to graduate school, I started writing. So I've been writing, you know, good 10 years before I came to Bowling Green. You always wonder when you move to a new place, like, will I be able to write in the new place? Like, will I, you know, what's going on in this? Will this be some weird atmosphere? You know, whatever. I don't know. But
a wellspring of inspiration.
Yeah, who knows? And so Cemetery Road and the cemetery in Kyriakos Park inspired me right away. That was Cemetery Girl was based on Kyriakos Park and Fairview Cemetery. So
that was your first book with a major publisher, wasn't it?
It was. One with Penguin, that was the first one with Penguin. Almost 5 years ago now. But yeah. I wrote that the first year I lived here in Bowling Green. That was the first thing I wrote in Bowling Green was Cemetery Girl, so it worked out.
Yeah, you write, everything you've published so far, pretty much all your novels are definitely sort of right in the thriller genre. Do you ever think about branching out? Is there anything in particular that you would be really interested in? It's like, oh man, I just really want to write a Western or something like that.
I would, there are lots of things I think I'd like to write because I like to read a lot of stuff. And so every time I read something like, you know, a Western or a historical novel about ancient Rome or, you know, a fantasy novel like Game of Thrones or something like that, or even history, like, you know, I'll read a book about, whatever, you know, the Battle of Little Bighorn or something, and I'll say like, oh, it would be great to write one of those things, but it's hard enough just to write something that you know how to do, to like all of a sudden write in a totally different genre, to take on the task of like researching something totally different and all that, it's daunting. So yeah, I don't know that that's ever gonna happen. Plus, you know, publishers want you doing kind of your thing. I mean, it sounds like, you know, I'm a bottle of Pepsi Cola or something like that, but they want to build a brand. They want you to be this reliable thing. They want a reader to be able to go into the bookstore and say, David Bell has a new novel out, and I kind of know what I'm going to get from a David Bell novel. And if I wrote a romance novel and somebody picked it up, they would be like, what the hell is going on? I wanted to read about missing people. You know.
Well, thinking of that, going into the bookstore, you've just announced right a couple of days ago that Target's picked up your new book as well for being a featured title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Target is amazing. Before I published Cemetery Girl, I just never really thought about like where would you. I just obviously I assumed like Borders and Barnes and Noble and those places will sell a lot of books. I just had not really thought of Target as a place that would be selling a lot of books.
Yeah.
I thought like I go to Target when I want to buy, I don't know, a new shirt or, you know, laundry detergent or whatever. But lo and behold, they took Cemetery Girl and it sold very well in Target. And so ever since then, they've taken every one of the books and they sell a lot of books. So, I mean, it's really nice to get into Target because they have a really nice display there and they discount the books. And so, yeah, it's been very good. So I love Target.
That's really
Absolutely.
interesting. You know, I grew up in a really small town, and we didn't have a bookstore, and there wasn't a bookstore in the town over, and there wasn't a bookstore in the town over from that. So going to Walmart was literally about the
Right.
only place outside of the library where you could buy a book. So, you know, sort of thinking of that, what's your history with libraries? Were you a big library goer whenever you were a kid, or?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about going to the store to buy a book, because when I was a kid, I would go to the grocery store with my dad. My dad did like all the grocery shopping in our family, and he loved to read. So inevitably we'd go to the grocery store or the drugstore, and he would stop and look at the rack of paperbacks. So that's just like kind of in my mind that I don't mind going to the grocery store because I always go to the book rack, you know, at the grocery store. Now I forgot what you asked me.
Just sort of what's your history with libraries?
History with libraries, yes. My parents were both big readers, and my dad in particular went to the library a lot. Like every week my dad would go to the library and take me with him, and so he would always go there, and so as a kid it was just perfectly normal to go to the library. The grade school I went to, where I went to school for kindergarten and first grade, was right across the street from the library. So you could get out of school, go right across the street to the library. They had a kids section, you know, and all that.
Yeah.
And the library in my neighborhood in Cincinnati, the Westwood Public Library, was this beautiful building with these beautiful wood shelves and wood benches to sit on. And so all my associations with the library as a kid were hugely positive, and just it was normal for my parents to go. And if I didn't go, my dad would go to the library and he would bring home a stack of books for anybody. You know, he would say like, "Oh, I saw this book and I thought you'd want to read it," or whatever. And
yeah, sort of a family's bag of books.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, in addition to your own writing, you're married to a writer too, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah,
yes,
what's that like?
Yes. Sometimes we think that we should have married someone with a more certain career. We wonder about that. I tell my creative writing students, don't marry another creative writing major. I tell them to go down to the engineering school, which I think is right over here, isn't it?
It is,
Yes,
yeah.
okay. I tell them to go to the engineering school or the business school and marry somebody who can support you while you write. But yeah, so anyway, that's the downside, is that you have less certainty. But the upside is all good because I'm married to somebody who understands what I'm trying to do, someone who can read my work for me and provide feedback, somebody who can help me come up with ideas. I mean, you know, it doesn't happen often, but occasionally, you know, you'll meet somebody who says, "Oh, I want to write, you know, I want to be a writer, but, you know, my spouse is kind of like, oh, you got to get a real job," or my spouse is kind of like, "Oh, you should do something more serious." And I think that would just be one of the most awful things, as if, you know, you were married to somebody who was not supportive of what you wanted to do.
Just completely
you know?
indifferent.
Yeah.
So what's next on your plate? You working on your next book yet? Or?
Yeah, my next one is due July 1st.
Oh, that's just like nanoseconds away.
Yeah. So I need to start. No, no, it's finished. Basically, it's finished. I've been working on that all this past year, for the last however long. And so there's that. And then I'm going to turn that in July. This book, Since She Went Away, is coming out. I'm going to be doing various, promotional things, going here and there, going to Thriller Fest in New York and whatever. And then I'll have to come up with an idea for the one after that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that pretty well covers it for me. Is there anything else that we didn't mention that you want to plug or talk about, or anything we didn't hit?
No. Look me up online, davidbellnovels.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those kinds of places.
Yeah.
You can see the exciting life of a writer on social media.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, well, we're getting ready to pull into the library here in just a minute, so we'll go inside and take a look and see if we can find some cool books today.